Arkansas over Michigan, Tennessee over Miami. The SEC owned the Jimmy V at MSG.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined by our good buddy, Leaf Tulane, and you're hitting us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch. We're here in the lunch hour on the East Coast. And reminder, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out goes to all you everydayers out there and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $150 back in bonus bets. Check it all out at FanDuel.com. I want to start by apologizing for my dad joke, my dad corniness to start. When you get something that rhymes like SEC, Jimmy V, and MSG Leaf, you got to lean into it, right? I mean, there's just no way around it. So
I liked it.
Thank you. You know what? I appreciate that. I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that one. Okay, look, we got to get off and flying, folks. We got so much to get to today. Dybantsa is off to BYU. We're going to look at some national champion contenders or pretenders. But first, we got to get into Tuesday night's action, which quite frankly was the biggest night of this week ahead of this weekend. Wasn't really much of anything Monday. Nothing tonight. It's a wasteland. And Thursday, we've got like Iowa State and Iowa, but that's about it there as well. Leaf. Let's start with this Jimmy V Classic. The SEC, I mean, it's not really a conference battle, but the SEC wins it. Hogs come back from down 15 to knock off number 14 Michigan in the nightcap in the first game. Tennessee did what you expected them to do, knock off Miami with relative ease, coasted home in the second half. But let's start, Leaf, with Coach Cal's Hogs coming back to get Michigan. This was a crazy game of runs. Michigan was up 36-21, just north of 6 to go in the first half. They cut it down to 4 at halftime, but then Cal's crew starts the second half on a 12-0 run, capped by a Nelly Davis 3 for an 8-point lead. From that point on, Arkansas never trailed. They led by as much as 18, despite Michigan going on a 16-2 run, cutting it down and nearly getting it done. They come oh so close. A great play design from Dusty May to close regulation. Danny Wolf looking for a backdoor cutting Roddy Gale. Nelly Davis just gets fingertips on it, knocks it away. Roddy Gale finds a loose ball and a desperation shot at the buzzer, hits front iron and goes off. Leaf, big time win for Arkansas. You believing in these Hogs or no?
No, I don't think. The thing about Arkansas is you have expectation of being in the upper echelon of the SEC. The SEC is too good to have that belief. Do I believe they can make the tournament? Yes, but I think that means they're going to have to go 500 in conference play, and I don't necessarily believe that they're a top half team in the SEC, despite this win over what I think is a top 3 team in the Big Ten. I think sometimes the Jimmies and the Joes outperform the X's and the O's, and I think that was the case for Arkansas because I don't think Calipari necessarily put them in the best place to succeed against Illinois. I think the game plan was terrible. It was just, hey, let's let this team who loves to shoot threes. This game was a little bit better, but Arkansas trailed by 15 for a reason. They were getting beaten up on the inside. Dusty May basically said, okay, we're going to let these non-shooters shoot and go into the paint. We're going to block shots. They did that for the first half, and then DJ Wagner, Janelle Davis, and Boogie Fland had really good second halves. And, that's real good for them. I think Michigan also took their foot off the gas pedal and started to get desperate at times and stopped running their offense through Danny Wolf until the very end. And at the end of a game, I don't love having a big guy with the ball, even one as nimble and fluid as Danny Wolf. I think that hurt them at the end of the game.
Who would you have liked to have, because the play design itself was great, but who would you have liked to have seen initiating that last play?
Well, the play design off the set piece was fine. I didn't like that they wasted 13 seconds dribbling.
Before that, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and then the play before that where they got blocked, Danny Wolf created a shot for Vlad Golden. He got blocked by Brazil, and that was a great play by Brazil.
I could not believe Brazil got up to block that shot.
It was a great block.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind the 4-5 pick and roll because that's their bread and butter. I just didn't love that Danny Wolf was the initiator on the final possession. Less so about the pass that got deflected. That was fine.
Yeah.
I just think that at the end of the game, Michigan's biggest issue is going to be they don't have a true guard. Maybe Roddy Gale or Namari Burnett, but neither of those guys wow me. And I don't think Trey Donaldson's a true point guard. So I think that might be the shortcoming for Michigan. That said, I think they're in the upper echelon of the Big Ten.
Yeah, that is a long-term something to keep an eye on for Michigan with that. Leaf, I know we often want to talk about the victors, but Danny Wolf, man, has been so much, he's great at Yale, but you just always wonder with a lot of these guys, what's it going to be like when they transfer to the Big Ten? He's not just a big basketball player. He is a skilled big man. As you said, he is really nimble. And that we continue to talk multiple weeks in a row now about how well it's going for he and Vlad Golden together in the post. In this game, they combine for 31 points on 13 of 20 shooting, 18 rebounds, 10 assists, and 2 blocks, man. I mean, these guys are doing it for Dusty May's club.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that those are the focal points, and Dusty May has gone to them. I think it's also important that Calipari realized, hey, Jonas Adu is the better player for my team than Big Z. And yes. I talked about that in the offseason, that Adu, I think, was the best big man defensively, aside from Janai Broom in the SEC. And yet somehow he was saddled to the bench for a lot of these games, and they're playing drop coverage with Big Z against Illinois. Well, you can play all sorts of coverages that you want to play with Adu, and Adu was able to minimize the impact Golden had in the second half tremendously.
Yep. Adu finally in that starting lineup now, 26 minutes in this game. Great to see 11 points from him to go with 7 boards, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. So, I think the hope is there that Coach Cal will figure it out and get him in and going, but you just never know with John Calipari. Thankfully, he did it with Adu. So a big win for Arkansas. As you were alluding to earlier, a gauntlet ahead in SEC play. Leaf, let's move. As I said, we got to fly through these games. So let's move to the first game of the Jimmy V Classic. I don't know there's a ton to talk about. Tennessee's really good. Miami's really not. This is 2 teams going in a different direction. Always love to see it when team ascends to number 1 and then backs it up. That's what Tennessee does. Big lead at halftime and then basically cruised home.
Yeah, Tennessee out physicals teams, and they've gotten more offensively efficient the last 2 years. Last year, Dalton Knecht. This year, Chaz Lanier and Igor Milicic. And maybe it's more sustainable this year as opposed to needing 40 pieces from Knecht. I don't necessarily think that they're the best team in the country necessarily, but at this point, at this juncture, their unblemished record stands alone.
Yeah, absolutely, Leaf. I saw a stat from CBB Analytics. Tennessee has played 340 minutes this season. They've trailed 6 minutes and 38 seconds in totality. I mean, it's absurd, right? Really good stuff. And I like that point. You and I remember talking about it a lot last year of like, we loved Dalton Knecht, but they were so overly reliant on him that now this balance is helpful, man. I love what Milicic is bringing to this team. Chaz Lanier, though, is doing what we expected him to do, right? Like coming in as like, he's going to be the dude, and he has been. 4 20-point games now, 22 in this one. He's not the same player as Dalton Knecht, but he's putting his best Dalton Knecht mask on and doing work for Rick Barnes' team, who, by the way, the Vols only went 7 deep in this game, Leaf. Is that a concern for you?
Not really. I think in the big games, more and more teams should play 7 or 8 players. Agreed. And not go in this 10-man rotation that eventually gets snipped off. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, agreed with that. And by the way, Miami, we don't need to have a big conversation about them right now, but they're going the wrong way. They started the season 3-0, all against teams outside the KenPom top 300. Now, Leaf, they've lost 7 straight. That's tough. I fear that we need to have a conversation at some point soon about perhaps the end of the Coach Larrañaga era in Coral Gables. That makes me very sad because I love him, and but we'll keep our eyes on Miami, and if they can get anything figured out, which is funny because just about a week ago, they almost knocked off that same Arkansas team we were just talking about in the ACC-SEC Challenge. Leaf, let's go to the Big Ten, which is on the back end of playing its second round of conference games. Just 1 game left for that. That's Indiana at Nebraska on Friday evening. Last night, on Tuesday, we had Penn State at Rutgers and Wisconsin, number 20, Wisconsin at Illinois. Both home teams win these games. Rutgers 80-76 over Penn State, coming off victory over Purdue, let's remember. And Illinois hold and serve at home 86-70. 88-80. Leaf, what do you take from either of these two games?
Well, I think Penn State's pretty good, and Rutgers has shown an ability that is better than I thought it was going to be, even a week ago, and certainly before the season, at winning games that are close. I thought they'd win a lot of games at home, and that's what they did, and win a lot of games in the the preseason against inferior opponents. They'd lose to the Alabamas, they'd lose to the Houstons, which did occur. But what I've been impressed with is they've been able to keep the games close, and they've been able to win games that they should win. And I'm not saying Penn State's a pushover whatsoever, but it's a home game. You're at the RAC. That's a very formidable place to play. And they won the game despite having two really, really good players and the rest that just have to fit into roles. And they've meshed better than I thought. I don't think it's a perfect fit whatsoever, but it's better than I anticipated. Maybe I was just pessimistic, but there's at least a reason for optimism, and maybe Rutgers will make the NCAA tournament. I was in the minority. I believe that this would kind of crash and burn, and I'm not saying it was going to be horrible because both players are so talented, but I just didn't think they're a tournament team, and I think they are at this point. And Penn State, I actually think is pretty solid.
I do too. I'm not worried about Penn State. I think it's just teams lose road conference games. Like, that's a thing. And yeah, I think Rutgers is somewhere in between crash and burn and NCAA tournament. I do want to see a little more before I'm ready to put them in, but definitely in some good shape. And man, you're right about these two players. Like, what impressed me the most about Harper and Bailey last night is not the points, although they had 39 combined. Like, they're going to do that. What was crazy to me is both of them had double doubles with points and boards. Dylan Harper, 12 rebounds, Ace Bailey, 15. That's crazy stuff, Leaf. And then in our other game, had Illinois beating Wisconsin at home. Just another kind of story of conference teams winning home games. But I think this is big for Illinois to show a win of this caliber against Wisconsin that's jumped into the top 25, has had a couple struggles since that big win at home over Arizona. But I think both of these teams are strong and fine teams.
I think Illinois is coming together pretty quickly, actually. Kasparis Giacochonis is my favorite player to watch in college basketball.
He's nice.
I'll just say that. He is Luka light is what I've labeled him. He plays just like Luka Doncic, but he has a college basketball version. There's less spacing, but his step back left is nasty. Might be the best move in college basketball right now. And then it gets Ivicic involved. Trey Whitehead, 20+. Boswell was hounding the ball. Like, that was as well as Illinois is going to play against a good opponent. They should have beaten Northwestern at home, but Northwestern's scrappy, and they seem to own Illinois at their place in Evanston. But Illinois, I actually have more belief in going forward than Wisconsin, which I wouldn't have thought I'd be saying as of a couple weeks ago, because Wisconsin's answer is just draw fouls. Like, they lost a game against Michigan because they couldn't score in the interior because of Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. Then they lost to Marquette because they were being hounded away from the ball, had a lot of turnovers, and weren't great defensively. Blackwell and Tonje try to go to the rim so aggressively that I think it stops the ball movement that we've become accustomed with in terms of Wisconsin basketball. And I just don't know if they have the recipe to win games against teams that have the requisite bodies to slow them down and don't foul you, send you to the line 41 times like Arizona did. 47 times, excuse me.
Yeah. Will Riley coming off the bench in the game, by the way, which is notable. I can't remember if this is the first game that had happened. I need to look back at their starting, but just coach messing with a few of the lineup things there. Leaf, let me just quickly mention 4 other games from last night, and then we'll get on to some AJ Dybantsa talk. Man, it was really hopeful DePaul was going to end their Big East losing streak, had a lead against Providence at home, but ends up losing 70-63 in overtime. The DePaul regular season Big East losing streak is now up to 33. Woof. Elsewhere, Brown ends Rhode Island's undefeated start to the season, 84-80 overtime victory at home there. Charleston, really nice true road win at St. Joe's, 78-75. And Cornell goes to Cal and gets an 88-80 victory. Tough for the ACC there, who has, not been exactly great so far in this preseason or non-conference portion of the season. Leaf, AJ Dybantsa, the number 1 player in the class of 2025, committed to BYU on Tuesday. Will it mean success on the court for the Cougs, or are we going to have like a Ben Simmons, Anthony Edwards situation going on there? We'll get to all that coming up in just a second. right after I tell you about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook because right now, new customers can bet $5, and if you win, you get $150 back in bonus bets. FanDuel Sportsbook app, man, it gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So maybe you get a hunch in the middle of the game. Well, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more. It's really convenient, one-stop shopping right there on that same page where you place your bets, man. All sorts of stuff coming up this weekend. We got Connecticut, Gonzaga at MSG. Make sure you go check out that line and so much more. All at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Leaf on Tuesday on First Watch. Nope, that's the restaurant. First Take. AJ Dybantsa commits to BYU over Alabama, Kansas, and North Carolina. Leaf, I know there had been some storylines that maybe Alabama, maybe North Carolina were gaining some steam late, but let's be honest, BYU was in the lead all the way long with this thing. Leaf, you are a resident of the state of Utah. What do you make of having the #1 player in the class in your state, both right now as he transferred for high school and next season at BYU?
Yeah, I knew about this for a while, that BYU felt very good. I talked to a guy about a month and a half ago, and he said, I'm like 95% chance they get AJ. So while many people seem surprised, namely Stephen A. Smith, appalled that he didn't go to your Tar Heels, which seemed poorly educated, to be honest. But
it was. Well, you knew it because I can't think of the host girl's name, but she didn't even say his last name right when she was setting up the segment.
It's tough, but AJ, you watch him and you see a guy, to me, that resembles Andrew Wiggins in terms of the body type, and he's got a better jump shot. So that makes you salivate thinking, okay, like Andrew Wiggins was #1. He's been an all-star. Maybe not exactly the player you thought he'd be, but he's got a better jump shot, and the jump shots become more and more prioritized than even when Wiggins was drafted in 2014. So I'm pretty excited about that. I have my credentials for BYU and Utah to watch games, so I will be definitely attending some of those games and hopefully some this year as well. And to answer your question about, are they going to be like Ben Simmons and LSU that missed the tournament, like Georgia with Anthony Edwards and missed the tournament? I think BYU will be pretty good next year. I think right now they're learning how to play with Kevin Young's pro-style offense, and they've got Yegor Demon. I think there's a real world in where Cannon Catchings or Yegor Demon probably goes to the pros. But there's a real world where Catching stays, Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders stay, Xavier Stanton's a top 30 recruit at center, and you have just a lot of bodies that would return, and you put the ball in the hands of a guy that I think can score 20 right away in college basketball. So I think they'll be a good team, and I don't think they'll be the national championship favorite just because they have AJ, but I do think they're a tournament team as opposed to some of those prior examples of #1 picks on poor teams.
One of Dybantsa's quotes in the show where he committed there, he said, "My ultimate goal is to get to the NBA. BYU has an all NBA staff. If it's all NBA, I'm trying to get to the NBA. I think it's going to be the best development for me." So, Leaf, my question for you, as we're trying to parse through this, because it's one thing to say that, but there's another, 7 million somethings that are saying something in his bank account right now. How much of this do you think is legitimately BYU and the coaches in development? How much is that Brinks truck that just dropped off a bag at AJ Dybantsa's bank? And I'm not questioning the NBA development side of it, but let's look at the real world landscape of college athletics right now, where that certainly plays a massive role as well.
I don't love the way college basketball is headed, or college football, just because of how much money kids are getting. And it's not because I don't want the people to get the money, but I think it leads to greed, and greed leads to a lot of transfers, and a lot of transfers leads to a lack of cohesive teams and a lot of drama that's unnecessary. I digress a little bit there, but it was apparently around $7 million that AJ is getting for likely spending 8 months in Provo. And I don't know, maybe he is worth all that to BYU. But my point being is, there's only so many teams that can fork out the money for that. And yes, maybe you would say, well, BYU is not a traditional blue blood, so it wasn't Duke, it wasn't Carolina, it wasn't Kentucky, so that's success. I'm fine with that rationale, but I do think the money being that high causes kind of this trickle down effect that you're going to see for a while, that players are going to, hey, you know what, this school offered me this much, I want this much, and I'll go here. I think it becomes about the money as opposed to the fit. And though AJ did talk about the NBA fit, you brought it up. Is that valid when you're getting paid $7 million? I'm not so sure that's as valid as he says it is. That said, I do think Kevin Young is a good developmental coach because he was considered one of the up and coming ones in the entire NBA, which we know has better coaching largely than collegiate basketball.
Well, and one of my thoughts with this, Leaf, is, we're here in a time now where G League Ignite is not a thing. That was a place where players would get paid when, a lot of college basketball players couldn't, which is why G League Ignite is now gone. But then they would kind of go away for a while because G League Ignite is not something you're seeing on ESPN all the time, like playing at Duke or Kentucky or Kansas or whatever. And you kind of go away, get this NBA finishing school, NBA prep school, and then you head off to the draft. And I'm not saying that BYU is the desert or being hidden away for a year, but it's not the same as playing at one of those blue bloods. Could BYU really just kind of lean into like, hey, we can kind of be G League Ignite, spend some money, get dudes to come in for a year, get them prepped for the NBA, and then off you go.
Yeah, the G League Ignite failed pretty quickly, to be honest. Like, we saw that experiment end, and I wonder what the later ramifications. It's not like college basketball is going to be abolished like the G League Ignite,
Sure,
but I think there will be ramifications to this type of recruiting cycle.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, Leaf, put on for me your Locked On Big Board hat, because that's another part of what you do. Yes, thank you for physically, literally doing it. As you look at AJ Dybantsa's game, is he a legit number one pick possibility for the 2026 draft?
Yes, because when you look at what Cooper Flagg is, he's all the intangibles, he's all the athleticism and size that you're looking for in the NBA. But what does he lack if you're being a nitpicking executive? It's he's not necessarily a natural born scorer like Ace Bailey is, like Trey Johnson is. Well, AJ Dybantsa's got a body more similar to that of Cooper Flagg than the other two, and a natural gift to score the basketball. He can dunk like Wiggins, but score and shoot threes more similar to that of, I've heard comparisons of T-Mac to Paul George. He says he idolizes KD, but KD is one of one, which thankfully,
yes, come on.
I agree. I'm happy he said that. That's realism. But I think there is some truth to the matter of he can emulate Paul George. He can emulate Tracy McGrady. I'm not saying he's as good as those guys, but there's length and coordination and shooting touch that is just unteachable with him. And I think he's a real threat. If he were in this draft, I think there's a real possibility he would go ahead of Cooper Flagg, who we're drawing rave reviews right now, scoring 20 and 11 in the big games. Like, he may not end up with that average, but when he's played against the big opponents, the Kansas, the Kentucky, the Auburns, the Arizonas, Cooper Flagg's averaging 22 and 11. So he's the real deal. He's a PTPer and a diaper dandy.
Come on, where's the voice? I thought you were going to bring it.
He's a PTPer, a diaper dandy. Are you serious, baby? Call the elevator man.
Yes, Leaf Tulane. I think that is the first Dickie V impression you've done here on the show. I appreciate you bringing that in.
Gladly. Dickie V is probably my favorite person to impersonate ever. That's awesome, baby.
It's so good. All right, gang. Since 2004, the eventual national champion has been top 12 in week 6 of the AP poll. Well, guess what? It's week 6, and Leaf and I are going to play contender or pretender with these top 12 teams. Coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, history tells us, or at least the last 2 decades of history tells us, we can whittle down the national champion pool to a group of 12 schools at week 6 of the AP pool. Everyone else, you're free to go. Thanks for playing. We'll see you in 25-26. Literally, Leaf, every champion, starting with UConn in the 03-04 season, has fit this criteria. Now, Andy talked about this earlier. I think it was actually on yesterday's show, and he looked at teams outside the top 12 that might crash that party, like UConn, for example. What Leaf and I are going to do today is look at teams who are in this top 12, who's a contender, who's a pretender, and ultimately make picks for who we think is going to be that national champion coming from this group of 12. So, folks, if you're listening or watching along in real time, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me run through these 12 schools, Leaf, and then we'll get into it. I'll start at 12 and go to 1. Number 12, Oregon. 11, Purdue. 10, Kansas. 9, Florida. 8, Gonzaga. 7, Alabama. 6, Marquette. 5, Kentucky. 4, Duke. 3, Iowa State. 2, Auburn. And number 1, Tennessee. Leaf, we're going to quickly go through each of these teams, but give me one right now that you think is a pretender.
I would say Florida. I like Florida, but I just don't think they're quite at the level of the rest of these.
Yeah, I can buy that. I love seeing them rise up and come up the rankings, but I don't know that they have the stuff of everyone else. The one for me right now would be Marquette. I really like Marquette, but similarly, I don't think the talent for a national champion aspiring team. I think the talent is too deep elsewhere in this group to put Marquette in that pool. So credit to them for rising this high, but some of that is a bunch of other teams losing around them right now. And so I would go with Marquette. Leaf, again, as we said, we'll go through each one of these, but give me right now one that sticks out to you as a contender.
I'm going to go with one that's not necessarily as obvious. There's a few that I have higher, but I'm going to go with one that I think is a little bit of a dark horse compared to what other people think. I'm going to go with Iowa State, true contender.
I like that. And for what it's worth, I agree. Keep going. Sorry.
Here's the rationale. Iowa State defensively every year for the last couple of years under TJ Otzelberger has been excellent. So those numbers will continue to improve. And offensively, Iowa State, as of yesterday, they are the 6th best offensive team in the not the NBA, the NCAA. They're the 10th best defensive rating. And I'm not the biggest believer of Ken Palm. You have to be top 20 to contend. It's true, but I don't think that's like an end-all be-all. Like, I got to watch you play basketball. But I watched them play basketball, and they're so much better than last year because they play at a pace. They're 100 spots higher in pace and tempo on Ken Palm. So my eyes were backed up by the analytics saying they play faster and they're more efficient. That's great. Well, they were already a 2 seed last year. It was a Sweet 16 team. They returned an All-American caliber point guard in Tamin Lipsey, who's been hurt and not very good. And they have another All-American caliber guard in Keshawn Gilbert right now, who's been excellent. So you have 2 guards right there. Then you have Curtis Jones. You added just Joshua Jefferson, and then you added Deshaun Jackson on the big side of things, and that's an improvement there. And then their bench has guys that know their role. I think offensively they're going to manufacture enough points, and defensively they're going to be very difficult and make it very difficult for your best players to score. Cam Jones might be the best player in all of college basketball right now, and he had a heck of a time scoring against Iowa State. Granted, it was at Hilton. And here's the other thing. Hilton, you're not going to beat them there. They went 18-0 in Hilton last year. So they're going to go through the Big 12. Really good league. Maybe not as good as the SEC this year, but still a really good league. They're going to be unblemished at home. They're going to win a number of road games because defense travels. And then they go to the neutral sites, and I think they can beat anyone. So I'm all in on the Cyclones. They're not my number one team as the truest contender, but I think that's one that many people would write off because they're not as big a brand as some of the other teams. But I'm all in. Contender.
You mentioned Tamin Lipsey's injury. Let's note that Joshua Jefferson is also coming off an injury. He suffered late last year against St. Mary's, which, by the way, I should mention, just going back to earlier, we didn't, in our Jonas Adu conversation, we've not talked about him coming back from it, right? Like, he's coming. So that's a major factor in what we're talking about with him really getting back into the rotation and what's going on there for Tennessee. We'd be remiss not to mention that. My contender that I want to mention first, similar to what you said, Leaf, is not my top contender. But man, they are up there, and that's Gonzaga. And it's similar to what you said about Iowa State because they've taken 2 L's, Gonzaga has, but I am still a believer in this team. Their depth, which is much deeper than last year where they hurt, similar to Kansas, their capability, their veteran leadership with Nemhard at the head of the snake, EK, just if the consistency is there, I do believe in this Gonzaga team as a contender. Leaf, here's the question. Will this trend continue? Will the national champion come from this group of 12 again this year?
Yeah, I believe so. I think the only team that people will point at and say, well, if they're not in it, they're not, then it's messed up, is going to be UConn. I think there's people that still believe UConn will come away and win this. My concern about UConn is not talent level, not scoring, but their defense is terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, they're 90th or so in defense as of a couple days ago.
Yep.
And they don't have a big guy. So I do think the trend continues. I mean, it's not that crazy of a trend to say that the best 12 teams through 12 weeks or through 6 weeks are probably going to have a couple layovers of the best ones down the stretch.
Right. Absolutely.
So I believe it. I'm all in on it.
Okay. If you had to, you gave Iowa State as you're maybe a little bit off the radar from this group, who would be your number one right now?
Probably Duke. And it's more because I think they have more room to grow than anyone else because they are young and they're already the best defensive team in the country. Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Isaiah Evans, all these guys that play impactful roles on a really good team are going to get better. They're going to know how to play these big moments better because they've been battle tested. They'll continue to get battle tested and grow more than other teams will in those same amounts of battle. I also believe that there's going to be better role definition. They're going to know who's going to play what. Maybe they've unlocked something with playing Malik Brown as opposed to Colin Malawach against different bigs.
Yep.
I think Isaiah Evans's growth is going to be huge. My big concern about them is who plays the point guard. I don't think Sion James or Caleb Foster are that great, and that does give me pause.
Yep.
But I think their floor is unreal. Like what team, unless you have crazy athletes, can compete with them in the first 2 rounds of the tournament? Not many. So now you have to beat them in a couple big games. They have big game players. So I think they have the largest room to grow. I don't know if I would like say, oh, I'm so in on Duke that I'd take him over the field. Like I'm not there. But I do think they have the largest room to grow, and they're already a top 5 team in the country to me.
I think for that same reason, I believe in Duke as a contender as part of this group as well, Leaf. Coach Shire seems like he's doing a really nice job of starting to figure out that role definition and personnel groupings. I love your point about Malik Brown, the reigning, just coming off of being so good defensively for Syracuse, showing that for Duke, man, this defense is legit. Leaf, my one for like if I had to pick one right now, I would say Auburn. I believe in the depth. I believe in the guards. Janai Broom right up there with Cam Jones as front runner for National Player of the Year right now, probably slightly just ahead of Cam, in fact. And man, so I would go with Auburn for that. So Leaf, I think so far we've identified 6 teams as contender or pretenders. Marquette and Florida as pretenders. Gonzaga, Auburn, Iowa State, and Duke as a contender. Let's go through the rest of this quickly just because we're short on time. We'll start at 12 and work our way up to one of the teams we haven't said yet. Oregon, contender, pretender.
Pretender. I don't think they quite have the horses.
Agree. Purdue.
Pretender.
Same.
I don't like their team very much at all.
Kansas, number 10.
Contender because they have Bill Self and veterans, but I do think their shooting is a real problem.
It is. I thought they had it fixed. Last year, that was the issue. All these guys that came in, Timberlake, etc., is like, oh, and then it wasn't there. Seems like right now it's kind of feeling the same, unfortunately. All right, we've already talked Florida. Well, do you agree with me about Gonzaga as a contender?
Yeah, I do. I think their offense is the best in the country, and they'll get better defensively. My hunch is that Ben Gregg will end up starting, and I think it'll even out a little bit the defense of the starters along with the offense of the second unit bigs. But I believe in Mark Few. They've made 9 straight Sweet 16s, and this team's more talented than a lot of the other ones.
Okay, number 7, Bama.
Yeah, contender. That was my other choice between Duke and Bama were my best 2 teams right now.
Agree. Bama's been off to a slow start, not shooting as well from 3. Believe in them. The defense is so much better than it was last year, which kind of similar to what you were just saying about, who were we saying that with? Oh, UConn. It's like that's what their problem was this year. Cliff Amori comes over from Rutgers, helps work on solving that. Excuse me. Alabama's going to be much better. All right. The final 2 we haven't hit on yet are Kentucky and then Tennessee. Where are you at on Kentucky?
Pretender. I know they've got big wins. I just think they're very schemable. Like, what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the ball to Carr and get a mismatch on the interior, or have Robinson or Brea shoot you out of a defense that's making you shoot threes. I don't think they have a go-to, break it down, get a basket type of guy. And their defense is fine, but it's been a bit gimmicky. When it worked against Gonzaga, they played a 1-3-1 zone that bounced into a man, and I think it was just tricky as opposed to sustainable. So I'm going to go pretender.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm there too. I do think they're a second weekend tournament team. I just don't think this year Kentucky is Final Four national champion team. And look, that is not that's big time for coming in. Mark Pope, brand new roster. That's massive to say. All right, Leaf, final one. Number 1, Tennessee.
Pretender.
I think so too.
I just don't think Chaz Lanier, when you go into SEC play, is going to score 20 a game. And so that means that you really have to buy the growth of Zakai Ziegler and of Igor Milicic taking a huge role from Charlotte previously. And I don't think his mismatchy, like switchable play that they've created for him, knocking down threes, he pump fakes, he attacks the rim, is going to do that much against Grant Nelson. I don't think it's going to do that much against the athletes within the SEC. And I think they're going to come down to earth a little bit, as everyone will in the SEC. There's going to be a lot of battling going on. I just don't think they score efficiently enough still, even though right now they are. But they've played the easiest schedule of any of the top 10 teams, like by a wide margin, if you ask me.
It's going to be so difficult for the selection committee to parse through the SEC teams and who is truly good and who's just gotten beaten down in conference games and all that. So I do not envy them that. All right, Leaf, we've broken down these top 12 into contender and pretenders. Let me run us back through them. We have identified pretenders as Tennessee, Kentucky, Marquette, Florida, Purdue, and Oregon. That's exactly half. You still feel same about all those? Any you want to change?
No, and it's funny because a couple weeks ago I tweeted out there are 6 teams I think can win the national championship, and those 6 teams are the ones we have here. So I'm still feeling good.
Which would be Auburn, Iowa State, Duke, Alabama, Gonzaga, or Kansas. All right, folks. There you go. That's our contenders and pretenders. Again, we want to hear yours. You agree? Disagree? Why are we idiots? Let us know. We always love to know when we're wrong. That makes us know that we're doing our job, because nobody gets sports right all the time, and certainly not us either. Thank you so much for joining Leaf Tulane and I live here on the show today. Lots of fun. Folks that are listening back later, we're glad you're joining in as well. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube and audio, make sure you do that so you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball. If you have not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you there. We're having great college basketball conversations all the time. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family, especially right now since we just identified Purdue as a contender. Let's go Wildcats, and until we talk again, peace.